Imagine this, somewhere inside the quiet corridors of the British Ministry of Defence. A set of locked drawers hides a report that few people ever knew existed. A report that declares, in plain language, that unidentified aerial phenomena UAPs are real. Not rumors, not hoaxes, but real, observable, measurable events within our skies. And yet, this same report insists they are not a threat, not extraterrestrial, and not worth further investigation. It's the kind of quiet contradiction that makes you wonder what governments really believe and what they want you to believe. This is the story of Project Condign, a study buried under classification for years, quietly shaping how the United Kingdom handled its own UFO mystery while the world's attention was fixed on America's Roswell and Area 51. In the late 1990s, while most people were fascinated by the X-Files and alien conspiracies filling late-night radio, inside Whitehall something far less cinematic was happening, but maybe far more consequential. The British Ministry of Defence, already flooded for decades with UFO reports from civilians, pilots, and even radar operators, decided to take one last comprehensive look. The Cold War had ended, defense budgets were tightening, and the MOD wanted closure on one nagging question. Were these unexplained sightings a threat to national security or just noise? To find out, the Defense Intelligence Staff quietly commissioned a study under a deliberately obscure title: Unidentified Aerial Phenomena in the UK Air Defence Region. No catchy code names, no headlines, just bureaucracy's favourite disguise plain language. Internally, though, it became known as Project Condign. Between 1996 and 2000, analysts combed through over 10,000 UFO sighting reports, many from the public but others from credible sources: RF pilots, radar technicians, and even police officers. Every file, every radar anomaly, every scrambled jet was fed into the study. And while the project was classified, it was no secret to those inside that the MOD was trying to wrap up decades of confusion about what the skies above Britain were hiding. What emerged wasn't just a report, it was a 460 assessment written in the dry, detached voice of military science, yet pulsing with something deeply unsettling. The report began with a sentence that seemed almost impossible to ignore. That UAP exist is indisputable. It was the kind of admission that the public had begged for, the kind of statement that could change how the world sees its governments. And yet, the report buried it within layers of technical language, moving swiftly to downplay what it had just confirmed. Yes, UAPs exist, it said, but no evidence suggests they are hostile or under intelligent control. Instead, the authors propose something else, something stranger than aliens, and perhaps even more mysterious. According to Project Condign, many of the unexplained sightings could be attributed to a poorly understood natural phenomenon: atmospheric plasma. In simple terms, glowing balls or shapes of charged air particles, sometimes formed by meteor entries or electrical activity in the upper atmosphere. They might appear as structured craft, hover silently, accelerate impossibly, or vanish in an instant. The report suggested that these plasma formations could even produce electromagnetic fields capable of confusing radar systems and interfering with aircraft instruments. More disturbingly, it claimed that under certain conditions, exposure to such plasma fields might cause hallucinations, or what it called perceptual distortions, in witnesses. So the conclusion went like this: people really are seeing something. But what they're seeing isn't alien, it's nature playing tricks on both machines and minds. The problem of course, is that this explanation didn't fit all the data. How do atmospheric plasmas perform maneuvers at hypersonic speeds, or track military aircraft as if responding to them? How do glowing balls of air produce structured black triangles witnessed by dozens of police officers over multiple counties? How do electromagnetic fields explain radar locks that coincide with visual sightings from pilots? Even within the mod, not everyone was convinced. Some insiders quietly joked that Condign's plasma theory was the perfect bureaucratic shield, an elegant way to admit something exists without ever explaining it. After all, if you can't prove it's alien, but can't deny it's real, you need a middle ground. Plasma was that middle ground. The Condign report referenced dozens of historical incidents, including radar visual cases and air safety events. In one example, a pilot flying over the North Sea in 1990 reported a massive, silent, triangular craft moving faster than any known aircraft. Another case involved military radar detecting an object climbing vertically at impossible acceleration before disappearing. The analysts reviewing these events didn't deny their authenticity, they simply suggested the witnesses had encountered rare atmospheric effects. Yet the report also quietly acknowledged that these effects were not fully understood and could, in theory, possess military significance if harnessed. That last part raised eyebrows. Military significance. In other words, while the report publicly dismissed the idea of alien craft, it simultaneously hinted that these phenomena might contain valuable physics. The analysts even proposed that certain plasma formations might generate microwave emissions powerful enough to affect radar or disrupt electronic systems, a kind of naturally occurring directed energy effect. That language, coming from an intelligence division, hinted at something more than mere curiosity. It sounded like the mod was thinking not just about explaining the phenomena, but potentially weaponizing the science behind them. The final conclusion of Project Condign was deceptively simple. UAPs exist. They are mostly natural phenomena. They pose no direct threat, and no further study is required. But beneath that bureaucratic calm, something didn't add up. Because if these plasma effects were real and could influence radar, human perception, or even cause radiation burns, the report mentioned in passing, then how could they be considered harmless? And if they were truly natural, why classify the entire study for years? When the Condign report was finally released to the public in 2006, after a Freedom of Information request, the reaction was a mix of disbelief and suspicion. British newspapers like The Guardian and The Telegraph ran headlines quoting the most shocking line, "UFOs exist," says Mod report. Yet the content beneath the headline was far more ambiguous. UFO researchers were divided. Some saw it as a partial admission, others as a smokescreen. Nick Pope, who had worked at the Modi's UFO desk in the early 1990s, publicly commented that the report was deeply flawed, describing it as an attempt to close the file on UFOs without actually solving the mystery. To understand the timing, you have to picture the atmosphere of the late 1990s. The British government was moving toward greater secrecy reform, but also greater digital transparency. The Cold War paranoia had faded, replaced by bureaucratic fatigue. The mod no longer wanted to be the public's clearinghouse for flying saucer sightings. Thousands of letters arrived each year, most describing lights in the sky. The Condign study gave officials the perfect justification to end that process. If the science said there was no threat, there was no need for further research. And so, quietly, the mod shut down its UFO desk in 2009, citing the Condign conclusions. But that didn't stop the sightings. nor did it stop the questions. Because once you strip away the government language, what remains is something undeniable: official recognition that strange aerial phenomena are real, often tracked by radar, sometimes seen by trained pilots, and capable of physical effects. What they are remains unknown. That's not dismissal, that's mystery wrapped in policy. The Condign report went even further, linking its plasma theory to phenomena like ball lightning and the Hesteland lights of Norway, where glowing objects have been repeatedly photographed over valleys for decades. It suggested that these plasma fields could, under certain electromagnetic conditions, generate coherent light that appears structured, meaning what looks like a solid craft might in fact be an optical illusion caused by ionized air. It's an elegant explanation, yes, but also one that shifts the unknown from outer space to right here on Earth, within physics we barely understand. Still, critics pointed out that this plasma model can't account for the intelligent behavior often reported UAPs pacing aircraft, responding to signal lights, or performing controlled maneuvers. If they were just natural effects, why would military pilots describe them as actively avoiding interception? The Condign authors had no answer, only speculation. They suggested that human interpretation might fill in the gaps that under stress or surprise, observers perceive intentional movement in random motion. In other words, the brain creates the pattern it expects to see. But consider this: the report itself admits that these plasma formations can emit microwave radiation strong enough to interfere with both radar and the human brain's visual cortex. In theory, such exposure could produce vivid perceptual experiences, perhaps even memories of close encounters. If true, that's a chilling implication. It means that something real in the sky could cause the illusion of something else. Not a lie, not a hallucination, but a real phenomenon triggering false interpretation. That line between perception and reality becomes the perfect cover. For decades, UFO believers had argued that the British government was hiding proof of extraterrestrial visitation. What they got instead was something more subtle: a document admitting the mystery is real, while denying it's alien. It's a different kind of cover-up, not of craft or bodies, but of uncertainty itself. Governments don't like admitting ignorance. They prefer conclusions, even uncertain ones. Project Condign was a conclusion. It allowed officials to say, "We looked, we found nothing of defense concern, and now we move on." Yet behind the scenes, interest didn't fade. NATO pilots continued to file reports of unidentified objects over Europe. British air traffic controllers occasionally recorded unknown radar returns, matching no flight plan. And across the Atlantic, the United States was quietly running its own secret studies, AWSAP, AATIP, and beyond, reaching eerily similar conclusions. UAPs are real, physical, and unexplained, whether plasma, technology, or something else entirely. They move through restricted airspace with impunity. What makes Project Condign so fascinating is how ordinary it seems. No men in black, no crashed saucers, just analysts, spreadsheets, and technical language masking one of the strangest admissions in British defence history. Its tone is pure understatement, the British way of handling the unmanageable. Where America leans toward drama, Britain leans toward understatement. That UAP exist is indisputable. The report begins. And then, almost casually, it moves on. That's the moment where history shrugs. If you read between the lines, though Condign's implications are enormous, It suggests that unknown atmospheric or electromagnetic phenomena can affect human physiology and perception, that these effects could be harnessed for technology, and that they are frequent enough to merit thousands of reports. It even warns that such phenomena could pose flight safety risks, advising further research into electromagnetic interference on pilots. Yet after those warnings, it concludes, no defense significance. It's almost poetic an official contradiction preserved in bureaucratic stone. The release of the report didn't end public fascination. In fact, it reignited it. People began connecting Condign to other secret projects. British Flying Saucer Working Party of the 1950s, the declassified radar cases of the 1980s, and even transatlantic data sharing with the US military. Some suggested that atmospheric plasma language was a coded way of referring to experimental aerospace programs, new stealth or propulsion technologies tested under extreme secrecy. The idea was that when the mod couldn't admit testing advanced craft, they explained the sightings away as plasma. Others believed the opposite, that Condign stumbled onto something genuinely unknown. Perhaps not alien, but not terrestrial either. The report's plasma hypothesis, they argued, was simply the best explanation the authors could offer within the boundaries of acceptable science. A way to talk about a mystery without losing credibility. And maybe that's the real genius of Condign. It tells the truth in a way that hides it. Imagine the scientists and intelligence officers who wrote it. They sifted through thousands of credible reports, watched radar tapes showing impossible maneuvers, and then tried to fit all that into known physics. Maybe they knew there was more, something just beyond explanation, but also knew they couldn't say it. So they said it indirectly. UAP exist. A small phrase carrying the weight of decades. And that's where this story leaves us, not with a conclusion, but with a mirror. Because every government report, every leaked document, every classified study from Blue Book to Condign tells us the same quiet truth. The phenomenon is real. The understanding is incomplete. And the explanations, whether plasma, or something else, are often just placeholders for the unknown. So maybe the question isn't what Project Condign discovered. Maybe the question is what it chose not to say. Because if the British government's final UFO study admitted the reality of UAPs, dismissed their threats, and then sealed the files, what does that tell us about how nations handle mystery? Perhaps disclosure doesn't come in a speech or a revelation. It comes in the form of a 460-page document that calmly says everything and nothing at once. For years, that report sat buried, unread by the public it quietly addressed. Today, it stands as one of the most haunting examples of official understatement in modern history. It doesn't tell us aliens are here. It doesn't tell us they're not. It simply says, there's something out there. And that, perhaps, is the most honest answer any government has ever given. Because sometimes the truth isn't hidden, it's published, classified, declassified, and ignored. It's sitting right there, in black and white, beneath the stamp of the Ministry of Defense. Project Condign, the report that proved UFOs are real and then pretended it didn't matter.